Have you ever felt like you're talking to God and hearing nothing in return? As if He's walked away, as if silence were too much of an answer. But what if God's silence is not absence but presence? What if He is teaching you something right now? Not with words, but with His very silence? Today we are going to reflect on the mystery of the silence of God and discover what He is doing when He seems to be doing nothing. Because sometimes the greatest miracle is not what we hear, but what we learn to feel. Before we begin, subscribe here to the channel and activate the bell. It's not just about watching new videos. It's about continuing to walk within. Here, each reflection is an invitation for you to get closer to the sacred that already lives within you. There are times when we pray with an open heart, asking for answers, seeking signs, and heaven seems silent. This is one of the most profound feelings of the spiritual life, speaking to God and hearing nothing in return. Divine silence weighs heavily, sometimes confuses, and can even hurt those expecting immediate comfort. But it is in this apparent emptiness that something begins to be born, not outside but within us. Divine silence is not absence. It is a sacred time of gestation. Just as a seed labors in the darkness before blossoming, God also works in the unseen. When He is silent, it is not because He has distanced Himself, but because He is shaping something that the noise of words could not bear to reveal. Immature faith wants to hear answers. Mature faith learns to listen to silence. Silence is the test that transforms expectation into trust. It's as if God were saying, "Now it's your turn to believe, even without hearing." The heart that crosses this void discovers that God speaks in ways the ears cannot hear. This silence is a mirror. It reflects what's inside us: impatience, fear, pride, but also hope. When the noise of doubt ceases, we realize that God was never far away, just waiting for our hearts to slow down enough to recognize Him. And then, silence ceases to be torture and becomes an encounter. Because the emptiness we feel is not a lack of God, it is space for Him to dwell. Silence is the language God uses when He wants to teach us something that sound cannot convey. He doesn't just speak with words, He speaks with time, with the winds, with the paths that close. It's a type of communication that requires maturity to be understood. When God is silent, it's like a teacher watching a student solve a problem alone. He trusts that you've learned enough to walk without instruction. Silence, then, is a form of divine trust. God doesn't ignore you. He believes in you. The absence of an answer is often the greatest sign of presence. Because the Father who created you knows that growing up hurts, and silence is the field where faith becomes independent. He doesn't want you to depend on the sound of His voice, but on the certainty that He is there, even when silent. It was the same with Elijah, who found Him not in the fire or the wind, but in the gentle breeze. God reveals Himself in the almost imperceptible. When He is silent, it is because He wants to be perceived, not just heard. And if God is silent now, perhaps it is because what He wants to show you is not said, it is lived. Waiting is the school of trust. When God delays, it's because time hasn't yet ripened the miracle. He doesn't work out of anxiety, but out of eternity. The human clock ticks minutes. The divine clock ticks processes. And true faith is that which learns to remain without understanding. While nothing happens, that's when everything is happening. Silence and time work together, like a potter and clay. Delay is not punishment, it's preparation. The heart that resists haste discovers the power of patience, the gift of continuing to believe when the outlook suggests otherwise. God's silence runs throughout the Bible like an invisible thread between faith and maturity. Job wept without an answer. David sang through his tears, and Jesus in Gethsemane prayed until his sweat turned to blood, without hearing the Father answer. But it was in this silence that redemption was born. The quiet heaven is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of revelation. Job discovered divine greatness. David found strength in worship. Jesus learned obedience through pain. Every biblical silence was a hidden dialogue, God speaking through resistance. There are silences that scream. There are absences that teach more than presences. Silence is the stage where faith dances without music. And it is in this space that the Spirit molds hearts until they become sensitive to the touch of the invisible. God's silence is not carelessness. It is a method. It is the pedagogy of the invisible, the lesson that is only learned when the sound disappears. And if even the sun went through this silence, who are we to want answers before the time? When God is silent, He reveals more about us than about Himself. Silence reveals the true condition of the soul. We discover whether we seek God's love or merely the result of His hands. It is in this space of waiting that the heart is tested and refined. Words cease, and all that remains is what we truly believe. Silence separates the superficial from the essential. It is the invisible fire that purifies faith, burning away haste and refining surrender. Whoever learns to listen to the nothing begins to recognize the everything. Sometimes we ask for answers, but God gives us awareness. We ask for paths, and He gives us discernment. Silence doesn't come to deny, it comes to mature. It's the interval between who we were and who we are becoming. A noisy heart doesn't perceive the sacred. Silence is the calming agent for the struggling soul. It's an invitation to sit and simply be, unhurried, unpressured, just in communion. Because in the end, silence does not reveal the absence of God. It reveals how much we still need Him. Not all silence is mystery. Some are shelter. God is silent to protect us from ourselves. There are requests He doesn't answer because He already knows the outcome. There are paths He doesn't open because He knows the weight we can't yet carry. Silence is the soul's invisible shield. It's not punishment, it's prevention. When God doesn't respond, it's because He's diverting storms we can't yet see. It's providence disguised as delay. How many times have we asked for something that today we are grateful we didn't receive? Silence was God's loving no. The Father doesn't answer to save His Son from the precipice of haste. He postpones it out of love, not carelessness. And when waiting hurts, remember, silence is also a gesture of care. It's God whispering, "Not now, for I still keep you." And maybe, when it all comes together, you'll realize that silence was the biggest yes you ever received. There are silences that hurt, but there are also silences that heal. When God is silent, He is doing something within us. The noise of doubt ceases, and the heart begins to breathe faith again. Silence is the cocoon where the soul learns to fly. While the sky seems still, the spirit moves. It clears what was heavy, heals what was wounded, and matures what was still immature. It is the time when the invisible works, silently, on the foundations of being. Silence teaches surrender. In it, we learn that we don't control God, we simply follow Him. Faith ceases to be an expectation and becomes a relationship. It is in silence that we stop seeking answers and begin to seek presence. Every silence is an invitation to transformation. It doesn't change God, it changes the one praying. And when the answer finally arrives, we are no longer the same. Because silence is not a pause, it is a process. And every divine process ends in growth. The day comes when silence turns into revelation. Peace replaces anguish, and we realize that God has always spoken, just in a different way. Silence becomes an answer when the heart matures enough to hear the unseen. It's when fear falls silent and love takes over. We no longer need words because we feel the presence. Silence is proof that God trusts us. He withdraws to watch us walk on our own legs of faith. God's voice may be silent, but His will continues to whisper in every detail. Inexplicable peace is God's silent yes. Serenity is the I am with you. Silence is the language of spiritual maturity. When the heart understands this, every absence becomes worship. Because in the end, God's silence is not emptiness. It is the echo of the love that never stopped speaking. Silence becomes an answer when we learn to see the signs beyond words. It manifests itself in the peace that replaces anxiety, in the strength that arises without explanation, in the certainty that comes without evidence. When this happens, we no longer need to listen, because we already feel. God speaks in many ways. But the most profound is always silence. He silences the noise of the world so that we can recognize His presence within us. And when we understand this, silence no longer frightens. It comforts. It no longer feels empty. It overflows. In the end, silence is where faith matures and the soul finds rest. Because when God doesn't answer, it's because He's already acting, and the heart that learns to wait discovers that silence is also a voice. God did not stop listening to you. He just speaks at a frequency that the noise of anxiety can't reach. His silence is not rejection, it is care. It is the most profound way of teaching faith without relying on explanations. Because true love doesn't need to prove anything, just stay. When the sky is silent, remember, silence is also a voice. And often it is in this place that God works most powerfully, silently shaping everything that you will still be grateful for. If this message touched you, subscribe here to the channel. Not just to watch more videos, but to continue growing in wisdom and inner peace. Each video is a conversation with the divine, and every time you come back here, it's God reminding you that He was never silent. You were just learning to listen.